This is the Rebel Author Podcast, where we talk about books, business, and occasionally bad words. Hello, Rebels, and welcome to episode 247 of the Rebel Author Podcast. Today, I'm joined by Daphne James Huff, and we're talking all about mindset and balance and writing and having a career alongside writing. It is an awesome conversation, so I hope you enjoy it. So I did just want to point out, thanks to one of my patrons who mentioned that we are almost at episode 250. And the crazy thing is, I hadn't even noticed. Like, I've been in such a whirlwind this year. I didn't notice that we were reaching another, I guess, kind of a milestone, really. 250 episodes is pretty fucking cool. So well done, guys. Thanks for listening. I really appreciate you all. Whether or not I can do something, I'm not sure. I am ridiculously in that kind of crazy rundown towards a holiday when you're trying to finish off all the projects and everything. So I don't know, but I will do something for episode 300 regardless. But yeah, oh my fucking God, 250 episodes. What? I really honestly didn't even think we'd make 100 when I started. I wasn't sure anybody would listen. So thank you so much for still checking in. I really appreciate all of you. A few comments on Lisa Cron's episode. Rihanna Mum on Instagram said, really appreciated this interview. It was refreshing to hear a new perspective on story structure. I like her assertive and unique take. It was certainly assertive. JM_silly said, awesome. I picked up Story Genius by her a while ago and it was a game changer. Camilla said, if neither pantsing nor plotting works and I had to know everything about my characters before I put metaphorical pen to paper, I would never write a single story. That's for sure. Oh, darling, I completely agree. I just don't agree with everything that Lisa said. As you heard in the episode, doesn't mean, that she's wrong in terms of her structures or anything. We're all entitled to our own opinions, but I don't believe that there's only one way to write a book. I just don't think that's true. Hey, Yanni said, very passionate about not playing well with others. I can't say I agree with her theories. To those who haven't been in the publishing game, or even those who have, if it works for you, keep doing it. I totally agree, Yanni. If it helps to know your character's strengths, learn them. If it helps to use personality enneagrams, do it. Whatever you need to do to get your story out. I completely agree. And I just think it is irresponsible to say that there's only one way to write a good book. I just don't think it's true at all. So if anybody did take that from that episode, please don't. I don't believe it. And I don't do exactly what she says. And I'm doing okay. All right? So anybody that tries to tell you there's only one way to do something is lying. There isn't. You do it your way, as long as you are finishing books. And that's something that Rachel Herron said, and that's always stuck with me. And she was like, are you finishing books? Because if you're finishing books, then you're doing it right? If you're not finishing books, then think about trying something new. But ultimately, if you are capable of finishing books and you are finishing them and you're happy, then you're doing it right. So just ignore everybody else's advice, basically. In personal news and updates then, I am 38 days away from going to New Zealand. Oh, God. So obviously I'm like deeply excited to go. But it is a very long time out of the country. And I have not had that amount of time out of the country or off work since I was 18, which is more than half my life ago. So I am quite nervous about that. And before I leave, I have to launch a book and get as much of the third book written as humanly possible. I mean, in an ideal world, I want to write and edit it, but I don't have a complete outline. So at this point, I think just getting it drafted would be great. But as I have seen with the other books, book 2 has ended up over 100k as well, although it drafted at 82, I think it was, something like that. So to draft a 100k book that I have not outlined yet in 38 days, as well as launch another book, as well as handle quite a lot of other things. And this is what my coach keeps reminding me. It isn't just writing the book. I have a fucking inbox at over 50 emails, all of which have an action associated with them. And those things take time. When they take time, that means I'm not writing in that time. So I'm trying to deal with this time blindness, and I'm trying to deal with being realistic about what I can actually do. I know, who the fuck am I? Who is this imposter, and what did I do with Sasha, right? But it just is not healthy anymore for me to not recognize that yes, okay, I could write the book if I didn't do anything else, because we know I'm capable of doing that just by word counts and daily, word counts. But if I pile on all this other shit, I'm probably not going to be able to do it. So you've caught me at an interesting point, because this morning is yesterday. So I finished on Monday. I handed the book to the editor on Monday. Yesterday I took the day off. I know, who am I? Seriously, who am I? Who is this person that is pretending to do the podcast? Because it can't possibly be Sasha. But yes, I did. I took yesterday off. And then, so I've come today to this morning, and I'm doing the podcast first. And in the back of my head, I am literally screaming into the void, because I have tried to pull a to-do list together. It is 2 columns and it is more than 1 page. And I'm just like, this is not sustainable. Like, this is not realistic. This is not sustainable. I cannot do all of this in 38 days and write a book. So that is enough waffling from me. Okay, the Rebel of the Week this week is Kiersten. Kiersten says, I have a sort of petty and also cat-shaped rebellion for you. But first, the setup. It was my senior year of college, and my 4 roommates and I were excited to rent our off-campus house in a student neighbourhood right next to campus. It was a recent flip, and we were the first people to rent it after the renovations. It was a nice 5-bedroom, 2-bathroom house. However, the landlord definitely overcharged us. I might be misremembering, but I think it was somewhere in the range of $5,000 per semester per tenant. Holy fuck. And he had a strict no pets policy. One day in spring, I came home from class and the back door was a bit ajar. After sneaking through like a person in a horror movie who is probably about to be murdered, I found the house empty, except not quite. As I reached the top of the stairs, I could see into my roommate Emily's room. In the middle of the floor sat a kitten. I immediately texted my roommate to ask if she'd adopted a stray, because that is exactly the sort of thing she would do. She denied it, as did the rest of my roommates. Then began the discussion of what we should do about this small intruder. Ultimately, we decided to keep her, because what better way to say piss off to our Jaguar driving landlord than to acquire a feline of our own. A few months later, during move out, the cat staged a second rebellion of her own by birthing 4 kittens inside the house. So much for the no pets policy, Jimmy. The landlord never found out that we had the cat. We got our full security deposit back. A few friends took the kittens, and the original rebel herself, Little Miss Charlotte, or Little Miss for short, still lives with one of my former roommates and is a very fat, very happy house cat. To this day, we still don't know how she got in the house. Oh my God! That is so cute. I love an animal rebellion. If you would like to be a Rebel of the Week, please do send in your story. It can be any kind of rebellion, something big, something small, or something in between. We really do need those rebellions, especially because we tend to cycle through these periods of having lots and then not having many at all. So please, please, please do send in your rebellions. You can send them to Becca over on rebelauthorpodcast@gmail.com. 2 new patrons this week. A huge thank you to Catherine Beals and Capucine Hoibatch. I hope I've pronounced that right. I've probably butchered it. But thank you very, very much for joining me. And a big thank you to all of my existing patrons. As I record this on Wednesday, the 12th of June, we have Poison and Prose tonight, where we get to chat and do some writing together and generally have a bit of a fun evening all together. So if you would like to support the show and get early access to all of the episodes as well as bonus content, you can from as little as $2 a month by visiting patreon.com/Sasha Black. Today's episode is sponsored by Fictionary. And as you guys know, I was the world's first ever Fictionary certified story editing coach. Let Amy Sund tell you all about why she loves Fictionary. But first, in case you are interested, Fictionary offers all of you guys 25% off Storyteller and Storyteller Premium and certification with the code REBEL25. So that's capital letters REBEL and then the number 25. Over to Amy.
Hello, I'm Amy Sund, editor at Red Leaf Word Services. Now that your first draft is done, it's time to focus on the big picture elements of your story. Here's where Fictionary can help. Fictionary can track over 30 structural elements per scene. You heard that right. Per scene. It presents these elements in graphs, charts, and color-coded diagrams. It's a fantastic way to pick out weak spots or holes in your story's structure, especially for visual learners. Fictionary is one of the tools I most often suggest to my manuscript evaluation clients. I've used it in my own writing for refining scenes, smoothing out transitions, and seeing where I need to focus my attention. A 14-day free trial is available for new users, perfect for plugging in a short story to see what comes up. Founder Christina Stanley has built a thriving community around the software that is supportive, social, and educational. Come join us and see how Fictionary can help you craft a novel your readers will love.
Hello and welcome to the Rebel Author podcast. Today I'm joined by Daphne James Huff. Daphne has been writing romance for adult and young adult audiences since she was a young adult herself. Her favourite kind of story has a main character who thinks they've got it all figured out until someone barges into their life and messes everything up. She never says no to free cake or cheese and can usually be found eating both to stay awake after reading all night long. Hello and welcome.
Hi, I've never heard it read out loud before. I really like it.
Oh, I love it. So I'm a huge fan of cake and cheese. So I feel like we're best friends now. And I need you to tell me what cheese you like and what cake you like.
What cheese? Oh, I thought you said tea because I'm drinking tea. No, cheese. So I'm kind of like a basic cheddar kind of girl, though I do like a good Havarti. And then in terms of cake, like pretty much anything chocolate mousse, I'm good. I'm happy. So,
interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. So I love me a blue cheese. I won't lie. I also love brie and camembert, but
The stinky ones.
Yeah. Oh, I love all the stinky ones. Although I would never eat the one that moves and has bugs in it. Like that's too far for me. Also vegetarian, so I'm not going to do that. But I will pretty much eat any cheese if I'm honest. Goat's cheese, love goat's cheese. And as for cake, I don't know that there's any cake that I wouldn't eat. I'm not a huge fan of mousse though. I love icing, and carrot cake and velvet cake and chocolate cake. And should we just have a show about cake? Or
yeah. Well, I just found out there's a bottomless cake cafe in London. So you were closer to that than me. Yeah. So Instagram just showed it to me. It knows me very well.
I feel like so you just need to send me that cake in a DM.
So yeah, and like 22 pounds, you get all the cake.
Oh my God. I think I know what I'm doing this weekend.
Yes.
Okay, well, we are here to talk about you.
Oh, yeah.
Would you like to tell everyone a little bit about you and how you got to where you are today? Because you are not in the same position that a lot of the guests are in. And so I think this is going to be really exciting to have a really different perspective. So yeah, tell everyone about your journey and where it is that you are now.
Yeah. So I was thinking about this, and it's funny because I think 12 years ago, I wouldn't have thought I would be where I am today. Just first of all, in Massachusetts, because 12 years ago, I was living in France. That was like going to be my life. I'd moved there like a lot of English speakers to teach English, but I studied art history. I was going to work in museums, which I did do for a little bit. But it's, if you're not French, I'm French now, but I wasn't at the time. You need to pass the civil service exam to work in museums, which I couldn't do. So I was like, great, what am I going to do?
So you speak French as well now?
I do. I've spoken it since I was little. I was in a French immersion school. So I've been speaking it since I was like 4 or 5. so was really able to do something other than teach English, like a lot of English speakers. And so I went to this like professional school, like, all right, what else can I do? Like, since I'm not French yet. And it was like, well, what'd you do in the museum? Oh, it was like legal stuff and training stuff and, some recruitment. She's like, oh, well, that's HR. So that's what I went into, and it was just the perfect fit. And I know you love strengths, so we can talk about my strengths because I think it just matches perfectly for my strengths.
Oh, do you have context as well, though, by any chance?
I don't think so. Not in the top 10, no.
Okay.
But no, yeah, but the top 5 are communicator, maximizer, strategic, relator, and consistency. And so for HR, that's just like perfect because it's like
absolutely
you need all of that. So I did that, and then came back to the States after my son was born. And it's much more expensive here, I think, than we were anticipating. So I was kind of like, the writing came, I've been writing my whole life, but like, you heard about my parents. So like, was growing up with writers around me, things like that, but just never really thought of it as something I could do for money. And so then when, it was kind of like, all right, what can I do? Bring in a little extra money. Cause like our first years here, like 75% of our take home was just on rent and daycare. So it was like, this is way more. Why did we leave the country where it was like 20 euros a month? Made that, so I was like, okay, what can I do? And and writing, it was 2017 was like right kind of at the tail end where you could just kind of put stuff up on Kindle and it would be discovered. So, but there was still a lot of that. And I think 20 books, 50K was just getting started back then. So like there was a lot of, it's kind of still the early-ish days, I guess. I know it started before that, but the earliest days of indie publishing. So kind of just dove into it, really coming from like a very practical, financial perspective, but just loved it for lots of other reasons, and have kept doing it for lots of other reasons, even if kind of financially it hasn't been successful, but successful for lots of other reasons. And, ended up burning out quite a bit when I released 6 books in a year. There was also, doing a full-time job. I had a podcast at the time too, and I had a young son. I was also getting like my coach training done. Like it was just a lot that year. So coming back from that in 2023, so I didn't publish anything between 2020 and 2023. But I'd published like 6, 7, 8 books before that in like a 2-year span. Coming back from that now with just more experience in both indie publishing and kind of human resources, just looking at it more a long-term career perspective and just being a little more comfortable with the time it will take has been really good for me. And I think, it's just totally shifted how I'm approaching things, approaching decisions. So it's kind of where I am today, where I've, I guess successful in one side of things. But it's even that word success, it's like, so it's not making money, but that's okay because it doesn't have to, because I have this other job that makes me plenty. So like, why would I need, the books to do it? So figuring out why I'm doing it, since it's not really that, I think is really helpful too. And I think long term, that's how you kind of have to approach it. Because if you're only approaching it from, this has to be if that's the only reason you're doing it, then I do think it's going to be harder long term, like any career, like any job. And I think that's what I see in HR too a lot, is like, if you're just doing it for the money, then it's going to be hard no matter what.
Yeah, I remember, I can't remember whose podcast it was on, but I feel like it might have been Dean Wesley Smith once upon a time, although maybe it was Joanna, or maybe it was the pair of them. I don't know. Anyway, and I remember somebody saying, like, would you still do this if you knew in 40 years' time you still would not be full-time and you still would not be making a ton of money? Like, would you still do this? And for a really long time, I fought against that. And I was like, no, like, I wanna do it full time. It's full time or nothing. And then actually, when it came to quitting my day job, the reality was that I was quitting at a point where I was halving my income, and I was selling not enough to cover my salary. So I knew I had to do freelance. And that was the point that I was like, actually, I would rather be skint my whole life and live a life where I'm still creating than I would be in a day job that I hate forever. So like, that was that moment for me where I was like, actually, no matter what I earn, I'm still going to do this. And then it was like 4.5 years before I earned really good money.
Yeah.
So like, I feel like I've lived that, and I had to accept that. And it almost is like almost a grieving process that you have to go through to say, actually, I might not make it, but I'm going to do it anyway. So I think that's so what is your goal to write full time? Is that your goal,
So,
or are you very happy writing part time?
I mean, I think maybe eventually, like, so this is the thing where, and it's important kind of in any career you choose, like finding that model. And I think that is, and I've heard, on this podcast, other podcasts, like the model that we have is like, yeah, like full time. So it's like, what are the other options? Back when I had my podcast, so it was Writer Mom Life. And I was talking to indie author moms because like we didn't see that as much, right? We saw a lot of, older men, and they were, later in their careers, children older, and if they had children, it was likely, their wife taking care of them, that kind of thing. And, them saying things like, it's 14 hours butt in the chair. And you're like, that's just not possible. Like, what is the other way? Or, they don't need to or don't want to do it full time. Because again, like that is a full time job, right? Like raising the kids. So like not trying to do another full time on top of it. So this kind of model for, what does it look like if you're part time? So really finding models was really important for me. And I think I found one recently last year, actually, at a conference. She was a lawyer, like her whole career, like lots of romance writers. And we can talk about why I think it's so interesting. That's so weird.
What's so weird is that I know two lawyers who are writers and are happy being lawyers. Like it's so funny.
Well, because it's I think when you reach a point in your, in your non-writing career. And so I call it my non-writing job, you're saying day job. And I do think there's a difference because if it's like your day job, like, right, like I don't want to do it, right? A lot of people go to writing because they don't like what they do. But if you do like what you do every day, there's no reason to stop, so it's like, why would I stop doing this other thing that I love out of some, model, right? That's like, oh, if you're not writing full time, then, are you a writer? Are you an author? And it's like, of course you are. So I think, found this model. Yeah, she was a lawyer her whole life. She was writing for Harlequin and, kept doing that the whole time. So when she retired, finally, she's got, 20, 30 books, can have all sorts of fun at conferences and isn't worried about like, oh, do I have retirement? Do I have any money in retirement? Do I, and yeah, so I think, and there's lots of skills, obviously, that you can learn in that non-writing job that really just will enhance your writing, I think, in lots of ways. So I think your question, is it my goal? Not right now. And I think I can see that future when I'm retired, or maybe, going to consulting, like what I do in HR, like it's going to lend itself really easily, my specialty, into consulting. So like a little more flexibility. Cause I think when people want to be a full-time writer, what they want is that freedom, and that creativity. And if you can get that in other ways without having to kind of sacrifice that, like, either the lifestyle or to put yourself in financial insecurity, like just to have that title of full-time writer, then,
and we don't write full-time anyway.
Nobody's doing only, exactly. Yeah. Like there's so much else that goes into it.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's
a myth.
It's a myth. And like I said, that those models are really important because it's like, and we know social media and we know, Facebook and all of that, but like,
and
it's hard.
It is hard. And I also think coming back to this concept of freedom as well, like I think that people think that full-time authors have all of the freedom in their creativity and we don't. Because what happens is you write something that does well enough to pay all the bills, and then you have to continue writing that. Because that is what is paying the bills, right? So then until you reach a point where perhaps you're like somebody like Sarah Kate or Katie Robert, where you've got these huge, huge audiences and you can do something that's more left field, right field. You actually are very much stuck writing the same thing until you have built a significant audience enough that you can then, they will trust you with something slightly off market or slightly more nuanced and creative. Not that writing's market isn't creative, but you know what I mean? Like it's not, I don't think we have as much freedom as we necessarily are told we do when that becomes the goal. Don't get me wrong, I wouldn't change it, but that's also because I have a major authority problem.
And I think that's the why. Like I think the why is important, right? Like, so are you writing for that sense of control? Are you writing because you don't want to have a boss? I think, and that's the difference too, right? And I think so the specialty I'm in HR now, it's it's compensation. So I like classify jobs and like figure out how much to pay them. And that's really getting to know the job. And I think just saying, oh, I'm a writer, that is not specific enough, right? Like if I go to some salary survey, like what does a writer make? It's like, well, and that's why these like rating salary surveys are so hard. Cause it's like, well, that's not all they're doing. Right. So are you a creative entrepreneur? Are you an author and speaker? Are you an educator? I feel like there's lots of different specialties within it, or just a way to really define it better, which, again, if it was my job to come in and do some sort of salary survey, I'd be like, no, none of the indie authors I've seen could I even put in the same like job category, because you're all doing different things, right? Like the job description would look so different. So I think it's really unfair, I think, to compare yourself, if you're starting
Yeah.
out or no matter where you are in your journey, to somebody who doesn't have the same job description, right? Like I could
Yeah.
be like, oh, I'm mad I'm not making as much as CEO. It's like, well, I don't want to do his job. And then B, like, we're not doing the same thing. So it's, compensated differently. So I think that's kind of where this HR lens of things has been really helpful, because it's like, oh, well, yeah, why would I be worried about not making what you make? Because I don't do what you do.
Well, let's talk about that lens, right? Because I think there is a lot of perceived negativity around still holding a job because
Yeah.
of this myth that the only goal should be full time, which is bullshit anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about how a non-writing career can interact with a writing career. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what are how can we reframe things to get positives out of those that day job, and bring them back into our writing? Like, how do the two interact? How can we allow those influences to be positive instead of negative?
Yeah. Well, I mean, just starting there, like if it's something you enjoy, there's no reason to stop doing it, and I think you're coming to writing looking for something that's not in that non-writing job. And so like for me, it was, started writing at a time, just I love to learn, like learners somewhere in the top 10. And so just like, so I gotten a point in my career, like I knew enough. And so I was like, oh, okay. Like, so I was just kind of like itching to learn more. So I was like, ooh, I can learn ads and I can learn this and I can learn this. So I really like that learning aspect of it. And, for a while that was enough. And also then control. So I think a lot of people, if they're unhappy in their day jobs, if it's usually a lack of autonomy or a lack of control.
Mm.
And so you can get that in writing, right? Because you control the whole world. Sometimes your characters, not always,
Oh,
but you try
wow.
to. So
I'm a
yeah, so
control freak. I see
mhm.
this now.
Yeah, I think you knew that about
Yeah, I
yourself.
think I probably do. But now you've like said it in a way that I'm like, oh, I have to confront this now.
Yeah, but it's knowing yourself. And so I think if you're lacking that, and I think that's where a lot of people are unhappy, is they don't have that control in their jobs. And there's a thing though, so it's the circles of just hit the microphone. There's the circles of control, which I don't know if you've seen this model before, but it's like 3 concentric circles, and the inner one is like what you can control, really, right? So it's in your job, in your writing, whatever. And then outside, and then the next circle is the circle of influence. And so those are things, right, you can influence by your actions, but it's still not maybe you doing the final decision. And then that outer circle is things you can't control. And I think so much of writing actually is things you can't control. And we get really stressed about those. And so, if you're in a job where, whatever your role is in that company, like where, your circle of control is really small, that can be really frustrating. So I think it's about then looking at where, then you can either stay in there and be okay with that. And then, then pursue writing as like, okay, that's kind of my escape, my escape hatch. Like, that's what I want to do. Or you can try to change that, right? Your day to day, because, you will overall be happier, in a situation where you feel like you have that control, whatever that looks like. But yeah, and then writing can also be community, right? So if you're feeling, I think moms with young kids often feel kind of isolated, even though, at work there were other moms, things like that. But just having that community for me was really helpful, and still is. And then also recognition. And so I think that's another big thing at like non-writing day jobs, where you're probably not getting recognized for what you're doing, because it's, most companies and managers aren't great at that. We do try to train them, but it's like kind of like cats sometimes, not very open to training often. So the recognition. And so if you can get that from your writing, whatever form that takes, can be financial, but also reviews, or just, that reaction people get, oh, you're a writer. Oh, I would love to write. And that can just feel really good for people. So I think it really depends on, so integrating the two, it's like, what are you looking for in both? And if you're not getting something from one of them, can you get it from the writing? And then just kind of figuring out that mix and what it looks like for you, I think can be really successful, and just make overall, both careers feel really successful.
So I think we've probably covered this a little bit, but I wondered whether we can talk a bit more about that dream writing career. What do you think people are not realizing or not recognizing, or perhaps underestimating, maybe about like reaching this dream of writing full time? Or just having a long-term writing career, not even necessarily full-time. Like, do you think maybe there's something you've learned from HR? Like, what do you think they're not taking into account, kind of business, structure, mindset? Yeah, wise.
Yeah, I think it is realizing it is still a job. So I think if the dream again is to be like, oh, I'd never want to, if I'm a writer, I'll never have a bad day. And I think, you can probably say like for years, like you have many less bad days than you did before if you were in a job you didn't like, but it's still a job. And I think that's the thing I've seen across companies at this point. I've worked at like, I don't know, seven different places. Like it's all the same, different countries, like different, right, nationalities, like every job is still a job, and I think it's, remembering that, yeah, there's going to be good days, there's going to be bad days. And in a career also, right, that it's long, like there's going to be up and down periods. Like, so right now, so I actually rescheduled this interview because I said I had a work thing. It was actually a job interview because I was laid off like a month ago. So this is kind of a down period in my HR career. But it's like, but it's fine because I mean also I work in startups. This is also like the third time this happened. So I'm used to it. But it's like, making that choice. Like I knew going into this kind of work of company, like there's going to be ups and downs. If I'd gone in thinking like, oh, startups, it's going to be awesome, and I'm going to make a bunch of money from, when they sell stock, and like it's going to be awesome, then yeah, I would be super bummed. And like, every time this happened, I think I was a failure. But it's like, no, there's like, there's a long term kind of view that you need to take.
And a lot of startups fail.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, really writing, I mean, indie authors, like it's a startup.
Yeah.
Like, from one perspective, like it's a startup, and the difference is you're doing it kind of all on your own, depending on, how much capital you have to invest. And I think that's the same too for the dream, like remembering that, what you put into it, it will vary. And so I think that too is what we don't often see on the indie side, is how much people were able to kind of invest up front and kind of their situation going in. Kind of mentioned it before, if it's, maybe it's, you don't have to, you're not the main person that's taking care of the kids. So like you can have that dedicated focus time, or you're later in your career. So you have stock you can sell, or you have a retirement fund you can dip into. So I feel like there's that part of it too, where your dream, it's based on kind of someone's, the invisible work that you're just not seeing. And so I think getting to see more of it, whether it's through listening to podcasts like this, or, just doing, really getting in there in the forums. I feel like the information's in there, but you really have to read between the lines sometimes. And yeah, just figuring out what it looks like really behind the scenes. And I think that's what we miss. But I mean, dreams are dreams. Like you're not supposed to worry about the details. So if you really want to put that, bring that dream to a reality, then it is reality. Like it is a job, and there does need to be investment and things like that, which, not everybody wants to think about, but that's how it is. Yeah.
What, like, I think we've sort of skirted around myths, and the other myth that I think there is that pervades kind of the community is that balance is real. um, how, you've mentioned that you're going to stay working and writing at the same time a number of times now, and for the long term. So, but you've also said you're a mum.
Mm-hmm.
So how the fuck are you doing that?
Well, he's older now. Yes. Yeah. So the secret is I have a husband who like does 90% of the cooking and cleaning, and would love to do 90% of the childcare if our son would let him, but he's quite attached to me. So he's so part of it's that is just being in a slightly non-traditional kind of home setup. He actually took my name when we got married. So I feel like that, yeah.
Wow.
Which doesn't happen a lot. So I feel like that just and it wasn't even my idea. He just like, I was thinking in my head like, oh, I'll be, Mrs. So-and-so. And then he comes home one day and he's like, so what if I took your name? And I was like, sure, we could do, sure. And then we were, we're living in France. He's French, and like his family wasn't an issue, but like going to the bank and being like, oh, hey, like he changed his name. They're like, well, we don't have a place on that for the forms. It's like, well, that's his name. I think when we did it, it had only been legal like 5 years for the man to, France has some really fun laws around names. Anyway, so yeah.
Is he working as well then? Is he?
Oh yeah. Because our son's 9. Like he's yeah. So he's 9. So he's old. Yeah. He's in school. Like we both been working the whole time. But like he did the first parental leave, right? Like I, had the maternity leave, the great long maternity leave that I try not to mention too much to my American friends. It was pretty awesome. But right after there's usually parental leave that usually the woman takes it, but he did the first one, so I could go back to work right away.
Wow.
So there is that setup, which I feel like, and I would talk about it a lot on the podcast when I had it, because it was like, I knew that was unusual, but I'm like, why is it unusual? And there's lots of reasons. Like, I'm not trying to be dumb, like, oh, but like, there are reasons why it's unusual, and I just wish it wasn't. So that's something I actually put a lot in my romances. Like there's a thing too, like they'll never there's never going to be a woman that gives up more than the man in my books, just because I'm like, I don't know what that looks like. So yeah, so the balance comes from that, where it's imbalanced in a certain way, I guess, compared to kind of maybe how a lot of households are set up. Also, just having one kid was a choice for lots of reasons, but like it does make a difference. And I think,
I was one and done as well.
yeah, so it's like if and that wasn't why I wasn't thinking right when I had him, like, I'm gonna only have one, so then I can be a writer. Like that's not what I was thinking, but
I did think
you
that.
did, yeah.
Oh yeah, no. I'm
fine.
very, very open about
Yeah.
the fact that I wasn't willing to sacrifice anymore. And I know myself and that I am selfish enough that I don't want to give up more for another child. Like I adore my son. I obviously adore my son. I do everything for him. I work in order to give him a fantastic life, but I didn't want to. I did not enjoy particularly childbirth. It was quite bad. I got sepsis. Like, I don't really want to be pregnant again. I've struggled to get the weight off afterwards and all the rest of it. Like, and with how much I do as the primary carer, I knew that I would put myself in hospital trying to run my business and have two children. And my partner wasn't willing to, one, carry at all, but two, she doesn't want to sacrifice her career either. So it was very clear for us that we were one and done. And, he's 10, rising 11 towards the end of this year. And I'm like, yeah, I would never in a million years go back now,
Yeah.
ever.
I know. Once they hit that like 6, 7, you're like,
Oh,
yeah, no,
yeah. Yeah,
we're not doing
my sister's got two, and she's right at that point where the hormones are still, and I'm like, don't do it.
It is, yeah. I mean, it is a choice. Like if it is, I know for a lot of people, like it's not a choice, but like if it is, when it is your choice, like it does feel very powerful and a little rebellious because you're like, no, this is what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And so far I've been good. Like I haven't had any comments from from family, friends, but yeah, it does help.
Yeah, and I also think there are certain women who are put on this planet to have children because they are
amazing.
incredible mothers.
Amazing.
Yeah, like these women who absolutely love every moment of that. And I love that for them. And I love that there are those people on those caring humans that make everybody feel loved and wanted. And like they are beautiful humans. I'm not that human.
Yeah, a lot of it's
I will play the villain. It's fine.
I think a lot of self-awareness, like I feel like a lot of what you said, it's very similar. Where it was like career-wise, like and also now we're in the States, so we know going back to France, it's easier if there's just the one. I mean, obviously, like tons of people do it with lots of kids, but for us, it's like, yep, this is what we're doing. So I think that self-awareness is really important for balance, because I think what often happens in balance is like just not being honest, right, with yourself, with your partner, with the way your life is, your physical, how you are physically at the moment, that kind of thing. So that's a really big part of balance. And I think too, like this idea of 50-50, like that's not what balance is, right? I think with my husband doing so much in the house, and like I have a lot of like time for me, and I think a lot of people would say like, oh well, he should get the same amount of time. It's like, well, if he doesn't need that to do what he needs to do to feel good, then no, it doesn't have to be like 1 hour for me, 1 hour for you. So I think there's that part of it. So same thing for writing, right? It's not, okay, well, I'm 40 hours at my non-writing job, I should get 40 hours of my writing. It's like, well, no, it's not going to be like that. Sometimes it can, like this, like, this round of layoff, like I would love for a piece of the story, like, oh, I was laid off and I used that, that severance to like build up my author business and like do all this in a month. I was like, nope. Not going to happen. But it is nice to have a little more time. Right. I can like expand it a little bit. Like I've been able to do things I couldn't before. Right. Like I got my books into local bookstores. I'm looking at like French translations, which is really exciting. So, there is more space now, but like most of my time is dedicated to finding a new job. So I think, there's the idea of balance not being 50-50 is really important. And doesn't mean giving exactly the same. And then again, taking that long-term cycle view of things where there's going to be ups, there's going to be downs, and thinking that it's always going to be up is just setting yourself up for disappointment and feeling like a failure, even though you're totally not, because it's totally normal. And, even this, like for me, like part of my career, like, I wouldn't call it a normal part of my career, but it's one that's happened before and that I've gotten through before. And, so I feel like, making sure, just keeping that in mind is really helpful. And I think, that awareness too helps with like, when are your busy periods? Because I think there's that part of it too, where I made a little, not mistake, but like my, kind of relaunch after being away from publishing for a couple of years was in January of 2023. And that was when also just a really busy, in the new job I had started, like it was a really busy period. I just didn't know. So I was like, oh no, I planned my book launch for the same day as this giant project is due. So if you can avoid that, that does help with the balance.
Okay, so let's talk about that planning then, shall we? What does planning for a long-term career look like? Is there anything that you've learned from HR that you've kind of brought over? Like how do we plan for the career that we want and the life that we want, rather than just the job or career we think we want or need?
Yeah. I think it starts with knowing that it'll change. And so I think planning, just like even if you're a plotter, I'd be surprised if there's a plotter who in the world that does exactly like I mean, maybe there's one person, but who does exactly like it's in the plot. Like it's an outline, right? It's a guideline. It's, to get you there. And even like, pantsers, like there is, a structure that you will eventually follow. So thinking of it more like that, where, careers, because again, 12 years ago, I didn't even know I'd be in HR. Right. And I definitely wouldn't think I'd be in the specialty I am now. But going back, looking at it, I was like, oh, like it makes sense, right? Looking back, all the things I've written, for my non-writing career, like all kind of line up, and I'm able to kind of put in the scaffolding where I see like, oh yeah, like these are kind of the decision points where I was able to make this shift. So I think, thinking of it that way, that it's a plan that will change and will need to change, is really helpful just getting started. Because I think if we get so attached, I don't know if you were like this, but like, like when my son was born and he wasn't sleeping and I'm reading the books, I'm like, the book says you're supposed to be sleeping and you're not. So if you're thinking like, oh, but all the things say like I should be at this point, right, in my career, whether writing or non-writing, like, because that's what everyone else did by this point, right? Or I'm 2 years in, I'm 5 years in, right? Like I should be able to scale up. And it's like, that's not how it goes sometimes. So planning to not plan or planning to deviate from the plan, maybe is a better way of saying it. And so the life that you want to, I think that also can change, right? And so I think, the difference between, my son now that he's almost 10, between when I first started writing and he was like 2 or 3, I can do way different stuff, right? I have way more time, way more energy. So I think there's that part of it too, where you can't fully plan things because you don't know what they're going to be like, what sports he's going to be in, or what, other things might happen, good or bad. So I think, knowing that whatever plan you have will be temporary.
Yeah. And
I
think
will change.
Well, I think on the other side of that, the more controversial side that people don't really talk about is that what happens when you do actually hit those goals.
Yeah.
Because we don't always feel the way we think we're going to feel when we hit a milestone, or when we hit like financial goals or writing goals. And, a lot of hitting those goals is actually the joy in the journey.
Yeah.
And then reaching that goal can be a little bit anticlimactic because it's just a moment. Yeah. And the thing that we all forget, or we know without knowing, is that nothing changes. You don't change. How you feel doesn't change when you hit that point. So if there are things that you are unhappy about, it doesn't matter if you're earning 10 grand, 100 grand, or 1 million, you're still going to feel those things.
Yeah.
And like, that's the other thing I think that we get to take into account, or just don't realize, is that, like if you do hit those goals, and I hope that everybody listening does, you might not feel the way that you think you're going to feel.
Yeah. And that's okay. Like, I think that's part of it too, where, I think early in my HR career, like I was going to be VP of HR, right? And I was going to be super high powered. My husband would stay at home and he wouldn't have to work. And then, pretty soon into that, I was like, actually, luckily I didn't get there and then realize I didn't want that. I realized a little bit sooner, but it's because I knew, it wasn't going to be what I thought it was and what I was looking for. And I think this is going back to the idea of like, why, the why. And I know writers talk about this, but I think thinking of it in what are you getting from it kind of way. So yeah, did you hit that goal? And it maybe the financial wasn't actually the part that really mattered, and you just kind of thought that's what it was, but it was really, yeah, the connection or the community or the achievement, right? Just the pure, like, I know, yes, you talk about your number one competition, so like, yeah, you won. So like,
Yeah.
if it's a goal that you get to and it's not actually winning anything, then is it actually a goal that that's meaningful for you? So I think defining the goals that are meaningful. But yeah, I mean, it is just a point in time, so that's a good point too, where it's just like, it is a moment.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah, I definitely felt like I won, but what happened is it then affected my motivation because I didn't have another thing to win. I hadn't planned for success. I hadn't, even though I was driving and doing everything to get to the point of winning, I hadn't actually recognized that winning was a possibility. Mm-hmm. So then when I did win, I was like, oh, now what do I do? Like, what is the thing driving and motivating me? And it took a little bit. Like, it took 2 weeks of me lying in bed, not wanting to get out of bed, going, what am I like that there? Before my coach was like, you need a new goal, you fucking idiot.
You need a goal.
Obviously, they didn't say that. They did not say that. But like, you need a new thing to win. And I was like, oh yeah. Like when you're number one straight this competition, like you better be in a game. Like you better make sure there's a fucking game every day that you're playing, because otherwise there is no getting out of bed. Yeah. But okay, if you could go back to day one, Daphne, or give advice to newer writers listening, what would you say to them to help them adopt a kind of more flexible, adaptable, resilient mindset earlier in their career?
Resilience, good. We like that word in HR.
Yeah,
resilience.
Yeah, I know.
Building
right?
resiliency in the organization. I guess, yeah. I mean, we've said it a lot. Like getting clear on what you want and being okay that it changes. And if it is money, like that is okay. And then just making sure you're making the choices that will lead to that, and that is somewhat predictable. Like I write sweet kissing only romance for now. Like it may change because careers change, but like I know that's not as profitable as the steamier kinds of romance. Yeah, which I do read plenty of, so it's not a lack of like knowledge.
We all.
Oh my gosh, but it's reading it and just like not feeling maybe fully ready, like in my I want to get like the basics. Like I've been at it for 7 years, like I'm pretty sure I have the basics down, but it's like not quite ready to up that, that part of it. Also, I still giggle when I like write some of the words. I'm like, I'm not ready for that. I'm not grown up enough for this yet. But yeah, so knowing that it's going to make less money, right? So that's also like, I started out writing YA romance. I'm like, that definitely doesn't make as much. I mean, some people do. But again,
mostly trad, if it's YA, mostly.
Yeah. So there's that part of it. So back in 2017, like in the indie space, like there was kind of that little niche there that was doing pretty well. So I think, so it changes, right? So I think it's, if you're writing to write what you want to write, like you just have these stories, right? Versus like, oh no, I do want to approach it as a business. And both I think can lead to long-term, career. It's not like one or the other is going to get you there, because it really is that goal, right? That why. And so if it's no, I want to tell these stories, being okay that it's not going to make as much. So if I could tell myself, earlier self, like, hey, if you're doing this for money, like maybe, head this way. Because at the time I think it was still and still now I think it's still promoted like, oh, write whatever you want and it'll sell. It's like, no, that is actually not true.
Yeah, it really isn't.
So that would be so for anyone listening, starting out, like, it probably won't. Like there are certain things that will always sell more. And if you don't want to write those, that's okay. No one's telling you have to. But like if you want it, if that
manage the expectation.
Managing the expectations is important. But I think mostly just being okay. It's hard because like how do you teach resiliency? And I think a lot of it is just you just kind of do got to go through it yourself, which kind of sucks because it's like, I've been like sometimes like there's one job I was training these very young managers, just they were, and it was just so great to see a company that was like, it wasn't waiting, for them to have, the 20, 30 years experience, but it was really hard because a lot of the things that, the older managers know, they just hadn't gone through yet. And I could talk to them all day, like, okay, this is fine and it'll be fine, but they just weren't going to feel it. So I do think, like, sounds awful, but it's a little like parenting where it's like, yep, bad things are going to happen. I can't take it away from you. Like I can't shield you from it, and it'll be fine though. Like, I don't know what to say.
Yeah.
So teaching resiliency, a lot of it is mindset, so I think if you're able to kind of integrate a lot of these ideas, like, that is long term. And I think in careers too, like everything can feel so like life or death and like, oh, this is the end of the world. And I've had those moments too early in my career where it's like, or even more recently, like that January 2023 launch didn't go the way I thought it would. And I was crying, even though it was like at that point, I don't know, like my 10th book or something out, like, and every time, you get so excited. So I think, hang on, lost my train of thought.
Yeah.
That there's going to be lows. And sometimes for some people, just knowing that it's normal helps a lot, and I think normalizing it is really important. So going out and seeking those stories too, I think it can be really great at first to be looking for those, talk about models a lot too, right? So like, you have these great success stories. And so I think if you're just starting out, seeing those success stories is great and can be really motivating. But what's really helpful is having people who are at the same level as you or just a little bit above. And so that I think was great. And part of why my podcast was so helpful for me in the beginning. I could tell the people that start a podcast because you get to talk to a lot of people and it's really fun. But it's they were at the same level as me and now they're friends, friends for life. And like we're still at that same kind of stage of our careers. And so we're able to help each other more realistically than like, somebody saying like, oh, just, do this or 14 hours button chair or just
spend £5,000 a day on ads. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So it's that. Yeah. So yes, I think I answered the question.
You did. So one kind of like last question before I ask you the ultimate podcast question. Any resources or tools that have helped you navigate the challenges kind of through your double career, let's say?
Double career. Yes. I mean, those personality tests, I mean, the strengths.
Do you have your top 10 rather than just top?
Yeah. So I'm communicator, maximizer, strategic relator, consistency, and then adaptability. Okay. So that does help with the resiliency.
Yeah, that does help.
Learner, arranger, intellection, and input.
Oh,
so,
okay.
Fun, yeah. And so just knowing that, this is the most recent one I've taken. The first one I ever took was the MBTI. I did that during my HR degree. So that's like INTJ. I think people have seen this, might be familiar with it online. There's also Enneagram, which I know you learned about more recently. So I'm a 5. So I do like these things too.
Yeah, me too.
So it's just in me to like it. So the Enneagram, and so that self-awareness can help with so much. And I think, because when I took them, I was like, oh, that's, I'm an INTJ. Like, of course this is how I am, and like, oh, like, of course I'm an Enneagram 5. Like, it just makes sense and can help you, and we talk about why the strengths, like it's so important to know, because then you realize like, it's okay that you're doing it differently than others. So I think that is a resource. That self-awareness is really, really important. So just pick one. Like you don't have to do all of them like I do. Like any new test, I'm like, what am I?
Yeah, I will do it as well.
Have you done the DISC? I did the DISC at work, which is like DISC.
Yeah, I did. I'm a driver, I think. That probably is not surprising you.
Not surprising, yeah.
It's pretty high on that too, I think.
That makes sense. Yeah, I'm like a CD because it's like I'm driving, but I'm also still the research. So I think, there's that part of it. So the more you can learn, I think, but these resources, I think it's great. Like, and now they are applying to writers more. I think that was the thing too. I'd done all this in a work context. So it was actually really hard. I did take Becca's like strengths for writers because I already done the strengths and I'm like, how does this even apply to writing? So, that was really fun to do. So so there's that. And then also, resources like the community is a really great resource, I think. And that was a big thing for me coming back in 2023 is that I wasn't starting from scratch because I did have, like, I was able to reach out to everybody that I knew from 2017 to 2019 when I was publishing more regularly. And I had, and I'd stayed in touch and I'd kept all my socials and, and like followed them and everything. So I'd kept those contacts. This is a very HR answer too, like your network, but it is there. And it's like, I mean, even for someone who is more introverted, I'm a little more extroverted introvert, but like, it's really, it's just saying hi, it's just commenting. It's just like, supporting. And like through that community, I mean, I've gotten free edits. I've won, free courses, right? Like there's just so much there that like, free proofreading, like it's just, it's out there. So if you have the connections, like it will happen. It's just, you can't plan for it is the thing, but it's like, the more people and the more, in it you are just like, and it's just saying yes to more things. I think like, yes, I'll be able to read. Like, yes, I'll give that a look for you, and just being really open to that can really lead to a lot of things. So so community, self-awareness. And then if you want to get really technical, like a spreadsheet calendar is very helpful just for the actual, like planning out your year and this is something from like project management, where, you know, if you have any of that in your background, like use
Like
that.
a Gantt chart.
Yes, those are my favorites, because it's you can see where it lines up, and you're like, oh look, I'm supposed to release the week of my son's birthday. Whoops, can't do
Or the
that.
week of a very large project at work,
Yes.
say.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's like, you know, not, I think that was the thing too, like this balance and this integration. It's like, or how do they interact? It's like they do. And I think denying that they do is really harmful. And so just accepting that, yeah, if you're going to do both, then do both. You know, like don't, you know, the whole thing they say too, it's like moms are expected to work, like they don't, like they're not a mom, and be a mom like they don't have to work. But it's like, no, like do both. Like have both, right? I talk about my son at work. My son knows what I do. You know, so I think integrating it that way too, just not trying to keep it a line between them, is really helpful too.
I found my desk and I was a driver, DI, 87% intensity.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, it says I'm most likely to feel comfortable as a leader and is likely to be assertive and to push her teammates towards a successful outcome. My abilities to be decisive and to work under pressure are likely to suit her well in stressful situations. That doesn't sound like me at all.
They are so accurate. I know that's the thing. Like
really
they're so accurate, and yeah. So they're such a great, like, again, they're a great resource, because it's like you don't have to figure it out by yourself. I think that's the thing where it's like, you know, I don't know, like whenever somebody, you know, isn't curious about themselves, like that's kind of like an HR red flag. Like whenever,
yeah, I was going to say
no...
that's a red flag for me too. I'm like, you're not.
Like, okay, do we not want to know? But so
Okay, well, this is the Rebel Author Podcast. So tell everyone about a time you unleashed your inner rebel.
So I already talked about like my husband changing his name, which was his choice, but like, you know, I was part of that. But I think what I've continued to do kind of like, you know, very subtly is now it'll be like, if someone's getting married, I'm like, oh, so he's changing his name, right? And people look at me and I'm like, what? So I'm like that person, or like they're pregnant. I'll be like, oh, great. So when is your husband, you know, is your partner taking time off? And it's like, so I like, I feel really like I'm so sweet, like and nice. I feel like in so many ways, this is my one like little bit asshole way, but it's like
passively
yes.
aggressively feminist is that
like suggesting, yes.
Yeah.
Or things like, or like, you know, my son's like, oh, you know, this rock scientist came in to talk to our class, like, oh, is it someone's mom? Like,
yeah
like, so it's like little tiny rebellious ways. Or like, again, in my books, like I think I have one where he changed his name, but it's, I try not to do that in every book, because it's like, it is a lot, and it doesn't always make sense for the characters. But like I said, like there'll never be a female character in my book that gives up more than the
I love that so
character.
much. But I think that's so wonderful, because actually a lot of this stuff should be normalized, and like it, you know, we're not saying that, you know, women shouldn't ever give anything up or shouldn't be the ones to do that. You know, it depends on your family situation and what is right for those people. But, you know, it's just like this view that men must not have emotions and they must be strong. It's all fucking bullshit. Like I actually am trying to normalize like feelings for my son, because I grew up very much in a tough, you know, stiff upper lip, like we, you know, come on, what do you mean your leg's broken, get up, you know, like I don't know, I'm being a little bit extreme, but definitely a very conservative, stiff upper lip British, typically British values kind of family. And I don't want that for my son. I want my kids, you know, if he grows up and he's a man who's able to cry when he needs to cry, that's healthy, or, you know, whatever. I don't know. That's just an example. You know, if he needs to feel sad or he needs a hug, or, you know, from his wife or partner or whoever, you know, I just think, just like women are taught to sacrifice, men are taught to be hard and not have any emotions. And it's a load of shit. So, you know, we all need all of those elements of ourselves. So I love that you're like passively aggressive about that. I might have to take that rebellion and implement it a little myself.
it's because it's the word. I mean, we're writers, right? So the words make a big difference. We even like, you know, starting with
says the number one communication.
Yes, I know. I know. So we like, yeah, it is very powerful. And I think this is a thing too that's interesting in like French, right? And it's like, right, there's a thing where you know, if there's one man but like 100 women, you use the male pronouns, which makes me bonkers. And so it seems like, I don't know if it's a trend or like officially kind of a law yet, where if that is the case, like you can use the female. But even if it's not, like, because we have friends and it's like, you know, the mom and two girls and then the dad, and we always say for the family, like, you know, like we use the male, but I've started using the female because it's like, no, there's like three girls, like why am I gonna So it's little things that can make a difference. And I think it's all about modeling. And if we've never seen it or heard it before, then of course we're not going to think it's possible. And I think this is, you see this in companies, and like, if all the board of directors is like old white dudes, like, then why would I feel comfortable there? So I think we know the importance of models, and stories are those, right? It's a way to view the world, whether it's, contemporary or fantasy or whatever, right? It's another way to view the world. And the more, diversity we see in that, then the more we're going to feel like we can do whatever we want to do.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for your time today. Would you like to tell everyone where they can find out more about you, your books, and anything else that you'd like to add?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Daphne James Huff on mostly Instagram. I don't think I'm anywhere else. Facebook. And I am, trained coach, getting hours, still need lots of hours that I can barter, actually. I didn't know this, to get some of my like certification hours. So if you want to do a proofread or, a beta read and exchange, get some coaching hours, like reach out on Instagram.
What kind of coaching?
So I was trained as an executive coach, which is like, work coach, but all my clients have been writers just because that's who's in my circle. What
does an executive coach do?
So it's just like life coaching still, but it's just more focused on like the career, side of things, but it's still life coaching, and, the same practices, the same mindset shifts, the same, accountability that you get from any kind of coach. But yeah, I did train specifically to do it with executives, but it's more fun when I can do it with writers. So
amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you so much. And of course, a giant thank you to all of the show's listeners and all of the show's patrons. If you would like to get early access to all of the episodes, you can do so by visiting patreon.com/Sasha Black. I'm Sasha Black. You are listening to Daphne James Huff, and this was the Rebel Author Podcast.
Don't forget to tune in and subscribe on your podcatcher. And when you have a moment, please leave a review.